When I was 16, my life changed in a way I could never forget. I grew up in a quiet little town called Maplewood Hills, just outside New York City. The place was peaceful, full of green hills, tiny shops, and one big school where everyone studied. That year I began grade 10 and we welcomed a new literature teacher. His name was Mr. Daniels, and he quickly became the center of attention in our classroom. He was only 25, but something about him made him seem older, wiser. He had dark blonde hair, neat glasses, and always carried a worn brown leather bag. Most days he wore a crisp white shirt, sometimes with a dark blue sweater. Nothing fancy but always tidy. His green eyes seemed soft and calm, and when he smiled it felt as warm as sunlight on a cold day. The girls in my class noticed him immediately. They giggled, whispered, and asked silly questions just to hear him speak. One girl even dropped her pen 3 times in a row so he would pick it up. But Mr. Daniels stayed polite and steady, never letting the attention distract him. He spoke only about the lesson, focused on teaching, never letting anyone feel left out. And yet, even though he treated everyone the same, I admired him deeply. Unlike the other girls, I didn't dare to joke or flirt. I simply sat quietly in the second row by the window, listening carefully to every word. Whenever he read aloud, his voice had a calm rhythm that made me feel peaceful inside. I already loved books, but he made each story feel alive, like it carried a secret meaning just for us. He explained not only what the words said but also why writers chose them, why a poem could sound joyful or heartbreaking. He often asked us to write about our feelings after reading a story, and I loved that task more than anything. I tried my best every time, hoping he might notice my effort. Sometimes after class he handed my paper back with a small smile and said, "Good work, Sophia." Those simple words were enough to brighten my entire day. Occasionally, he greeted me in the hallway with a smile. My cheeks burned hot every time, but inside I felt light, as if I was carrying a wonderful secret. I never skipped his lessons. Even when I wasn't feeling well, I went to school just to see him. On days when I knew I would sit in his class, I wore my nicest clothes. I brushed my hair neatly and slipped on a little silver ring my grandmother once gave me. I wasn't trying to look beautiful like the other girls. I only wanted to feel a little special, maybe even a little different in his eyes. Still, Mr. Daniels stayed the same with everyone. He was kind, patient, but never too close. When he asked me questions in class, my hands shook and my heart raced, but I forced myself to answer. And if he said, "Well done," I couldn't stop smiling for hours afterward. At home, I thought about him more than I wanted to admit. I wondered if he liked music, or if he spent his evenings reading the way I did. I imagined whether he had a cat, or maybe a dog, though I didn't know the truth. One day, by chance, I saw him in the grocery store. He carried a basket filled with bread and fruit. When he spotted me, he smiled and said, "Hello, Sophia. Doing some shopping?" My hands turned cold, but I answered with a smile, and the happiness of that moment stayed with me all day. A week later, I ran into him again, this time outside a small bookshop. He wasn't alone. There was another young man with him, and they laughed as they walked together. When Mr. Daniels saw me, he waved and called out a friendly hello. I waved back, but as he disappeared down the street, a strange ache grew inside me. I didn't like seeing him with someone else. The school year kept moving forward, the air grew colder, and the trees turned brown. At the school festival, he helped at the bookstall. I bought a small storybook, and when he saw my choice, he said warmly, "Good one." I wanted to say more to keep him talking, but the words wouldn't come. I only whispered thank you and walked away. Later that night, I thought of a dozen clever things I could have said, but it was too late. So I kept showing my feelings through essays and homework instead. Mr. Daniels gave me good grades in literature. On my papers, he often wrote little notes, "Very thoughtful," or "Well done." I saved them all in a box under my bed and read them again and again. Each one felt like a secret gift. When winter arrived, Maplewood Hills was covered in snow. School closed for several days, and I spent my time at home reading and daydreaming. Sometimes I even dreamed about him. About walking with him through the snow, speaking softly about poems and stories. When school opened again, he hadn't changed. Still calm, still kind, still focused only on teaching. And I hadn't changed either. Quiet, shy, and holding feelings I never told anyone about. Not even my best friend knew. I was sure people would laugh if I confessed. They might call it childish or silly, but to me it felt real. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. It was the last day before spring break. At the end of class, Mr. Daniels told us he had news. He was leaving Maplewood Hills. He had accepted a new job, teaching at a university in another city. The room went silent. A few girls looked heartbroken, and one of them even cried. I just sat there, frozen, unable to move. My world suddenly felt empty. I couldn't move. My whole body felt frozen in that moment, as if the air itself had turned heavy. I just sat there in silence, staring at Mr. Daniels, trying to understand what he had said. He smiled at us with kindness, telling the class that he had enjoyed teaching and wished us all success in the future. His voice was calm, almost cheerful, but for me it sounded like the end of something important. When the bell rang and the lesson was over, I gathered my books slowly, hoping the minutes would stretch out longer. I walked out of the classroom with heavy steps, not wanting to leave. Instead of going straight home, I wandered through the school grounds and found myself in the small garden behind the building. I sat down on a wooden bench, the surface damp from recent rain. The trees were bare, their branches reaching into the gray sky, and the ground smelled of wet earth. Everything felt quiet, almost too quiet, as if the world was mourning with me. Looking up at the clouds, I felt an emptiness grow inside me, like I had just lost something I would never find again. That evening, I walked aimlessly around my neighborhood. The streets were familiar, yet they seemed strange, as though I was seeing them through different eyes. I didn't know why I kept walking, but my legs carried me forward until I reached a narrow, quiet street I rarely used. At the end of it, I noticed a small white house with a neat garden. I had walked past it before without paying attention, but now I knew it was his. My heart pounded as I stopped across the street, staring at the glowing window. The light inside was warm, and for a second I thought I saw a shadow move across the curtain. Was it him? I wanted to stay to watch longer, but I couldn't. I turned away quickly and hurried home, my chest tight with feelings I didn't know how to name. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering every moment we had shared in class. The stories he read, the times his eyes met mine, the simple words of encouragement that had meant so much. Now he was leaving, and the thought made my chest ache. I wondered if I would ever see him again. I hadn't said goodbye. I couldn't bring myself to, because the word felt too final, too heavy. All I could do was lie awake, holding on to memories I didn't want to lose. After that day, Maplewood Hills High School felt completely different. I still went to class each morning, but the excitement was gone. Literature was no longer a class I looked forward to. It became just another subject. The new teacher was fine, even skilled, but I felt no spark, no magic in their lessons. I missed Mr. Daniels' voice, his gentle smile, and the way he made every story feel alive. For weeks, I carried that emptiness with me. Sometimes when walking home, I passed by his old house. The lights were off now, and soon I saw strangers in the garden. A new family had moved in. It felt wrong, as if the past had been erased. Watching them laugh and sit on the porch made me realize how quickly memories could fade. Time didn't stop, even though I wanted it to. The seasons shifted, summer arrived, and the school year came to an end. I tried to focus on the future instead of the past. University entrance exams were coming, and I decided I wanted to study English literature. It felt like the natural path for me, maybe even a way to stay close to the world that reminded me of him. I spent long hours reading, writing essays, and practicing grammar drills until late at night. My parents were proud and supportive. They encouraged me and told me I had a good chance of entering a university in the city. To prepare even better, I enrolled in a private evening class. The group was small, only 8 students, and the lessons were held twice a week in a quiet building near the train station. On the first day I arrived early, opened my notebook and tried to calm my nerves. The room smelled faintly of chalk and old books. A few other students were already sitting at their desks. Then the door opened and in walked the teacher. My heart nearly stopped. It was him, Mr. Daniels. He looked just as shocked as I felt when our eyes met, but quickly, his expression softened into a smile. "Welcome, everyone," he said warmly. "I'm Mr. Daniels, and I'll be your teacher for the next 6 months." I could hardly believe it. He was standing just a few steps away from me again. He looked slightly different now. His hair was cut shorter, and he wore a dark jacket instead of his usual sweater. But his eyes, those green eyes, were exactly the same. My hands grew cold, just as they used to in his classroom back in high school. After class ended, he walked over to me. "Sophia," he said gently, "it's good to see you again. You've grown." I smiled nervously and replied, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I moved back last month," he explained. "I missed teaching high school students, so I decided to return. And now I'll be teaching here for a while." We didn't say much more, but those few words filled me with warmth. It felt like something long lost had suddenly returned to me. The weeks that followed passed quickly. I poured my energy into his lessons, answering questions, completing every assignment, and often staying behind after class to ask for extra help. Sometimes, when everyone else left, we spoke for a few minutes. He asked me about my goals and future plans. I told him I wanted to study literature at university, and he nodded approvingly, saying it was a wonderful choice. One evening after class, heavy rain began to fall. I hadn't brought an umbrella, so I stood by the doorway, watching the street blur under sheets of water. The air smelled of wet pavement and fresh rain. Mr. Daniels noticed me waiting. Holding a large black umbrella, he walked over and asked softly, "Would you like me to walk you home?" I was surprised, my heart racing. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. We stepped outside together, sharing the umbrella as the rain tapped gently above us. The streets were nearly empty, the only sound the steady rhythm of water hitting the ground. "Do you still read as much as before?" he asked as we walked. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Even more than before." We talked about books, about the future, and about small everyday things. The walk felt longer than it really was, and I wished it would never end. The rain, the quiet streets, and his presence beside me made it one of the most special evenings of my life. After that evening, he started walking me home more often. Sometimes, instead of going straight back, we would stop at the park and sit on one of the old wooden benches. We would talk about everything, about stories we had read, about the songs that meant something to us, or just about the small things that filled our days. He told me about the challenges of his new job, while I shared my hopes and dreams for the future. We laughed a lot together, and in those moments it no longer felt like I was just his student. We became two people who really understood one another, as if we were meeting on the same level for the first time. One Saturday, he looked at me with a shy smile and asked if I wanted to go to the cinema. He said it was an old movie, but he thought I would enjoy it. I agreed without even thinking twice, my heart already beating faster than usual. That evening, I wore a simple but pretty dress and a small necklace that had always felt special to me. We met outside the theater, and when I saw him waiting there, I noticed how happy he looked just to see me. We watched the film together, and afterwards we wandered to a little cafe nearby. It was raining again, and through the windows the cafe lights glowed warm and golden, like something out of a painting. That night something happened that I will never forget. He kissed me for the very first time. It was gentle, almost hesitant, and yet it felt like stepping into a dream I never wanted to wake up from. After that, we began spending even more time together. We kept it between us as a secret no one else could touch. I didn't tell my parents, and I didn't even whisper about it to my closest friends. I didn't want anyone to judge us or try to separate us. I was afraid of losing him again, and so I kept everything locked inside. Sometimes I asked myself if what we had was really possible. After all, I was still only a student and he was much older than me. But when we sat together, when our conversation stretched on for hours, it never felt wrong. We shared the same love for books, the same taste in music, and the same way of seeing the world. With him I felt safe, noticed, and truly understood. The months slipped by quickly, and soon my exams were getting closer. I threw myself into studying harder than I ever had before, and Mr. Daniels supported me every step of the way. He gave me practice questions, shared his advice, and always told me to believe in myself. "You're a smart girl, Sophia. You can do this," he said once, and those words stayed with me, echoing in my mind whenever I felt tired or weak. But one warm afternoon something changed, and I could sense it before he even spoke. We were sitting on a bench in the park when I noticed the serious look on his face. My heart grew heavy because I already knew something was wrong. He took a breath and said, "I need to tell you something. I got a job offer." I looked at him, my chest tightening. "Where?" I asked softly. He told me it was in the United States, at a school in Boston where he had been invited to teach literature. It was a huge opportunity for him, and I could see that in his eyes. He added quickly, "I haven't said yes yet, but it's a good chance for me." As his words sank in, I felt my heart begin to break slowly, piece by piece. I tried to smile, but my lips wouldn't move the way I wanted. Quietly I whispered, "I understand." He reached for my hand then, and his voice was full of warmth as he said, "I care about you, Sophia. You're very special to me, but this is important for my future." I nodded, forcing myself to be brave. I didn't want to hold him back. I wanted him to succeed, to grow, to follow his dreams. And yet, a part of me was terrified of losing him all over again. We promised to stay in touch. He said he would write me letters, and I promised to answer each one. The following weeks were heavy, every meeting between us feeling like another goodbye. On his very last day, we saw each other one final time. He handed me a small book of poems, and on the inside cover, he had written my name. "Never stop writing," he said softly. I hugged him tightly, smiled with all the strength I had left, and then he was gone. Just like that. When Mr. Daniels left for Boston, I felt hollow, as if someone had taken the music out of my life. I still went to my English classes and kept preparing for my university exams, but inside I was different. My heart was quiet, like a song that had faded away. First we exchanged letters. He wrote about his new job, the school where he taught, and the busy city around him. I wrote back, telling him about my exam preparations, the books I was reading, and the little things from home. Every week, I waited eagerly for his letters. I would check the mailbox every single day, hoping to see his familiar handwriting on an envelope. For the first few months, his letters came regularly, and each one brought me comfort. But then something shifted. The letters began to arrive late, 2 weeks between them, then sometimes 3. And then one day nothing came at all. I kept waiting, writing him again, but the silence stretched on. When a new letter finally arrived, it was short, rushed, and missing the warmth I had always felt in his words. He said he was busy, that his work demanded everything from him, and he hoped I was doing well. I read the letter over and over, but something was missing. His words no longer felt like his. They seemed distant, cold, like he was writing to someone he barely knew. I held back from answering right away, and then I simply stopped writing altogether. Not long after, I passed my exams and was accepted into a university in New York City. My parents were overjoyed, and my friends celebrated with me. On the outside, I smiled with them, but inside I stayed quiet. I carried the memory of Mr. Daniels like a closed book that no one else was allowed to open. I didn't speak of him to anyone. University life was busy enough. I made new friends, studied hard, and filled my days with responsibilities. Time moved forward, and little by little, Mr. Daniels became only a memory. Still, I kept the book of poems he had given me. I didn't open it often, but I always kept it safe, resting on my shelf. Years slipped by, and during my final year of university, I found myself one evening sitting in the library. I was tired after hours of studying and decided to take a break. I opened my laptop and logged into a social media site, without knowing what I was about to find. I typed his name, James Daniels, into the search bar, and in seconds there he was. His profile picture showed him standing in front of a school building, looking very different from how I remembered. His hair was shorter now, his once bright eyes seemed tired, and he had grown a beard that made him look older, almost heavier with the years. For a long moment I just sat there, staring at the screen, not knowing what to do. My heart beat fast, almost painfully, as memories rushed back. The sound of his voice, the way he once smiled at me, the evenings in the rain. I hesitated, my fingers frozen over the keyboard. Then, as if my heart spoke louder than my mind, I typed a short message. "Hello, Mr. Daniels. This is Sophia from Maplewood Hills. I hope you remember me." And before I could talk myself out of it, I pressed send. The next day, when I checked my inbox, his reply was waiting for me. My breath caught when I read the words. "Of course I remember you, Sophia. It's nice to hear from you. How have you been?" In that simple line, years seemed to fold in on themselves, like the distance between us had suddenly shrunk. We began to talk online, cautiously at first, sharing the basics, where we lived now, the jobs we had, and how life had shifted since those long ago days. After a few days of polite exchanges, he asked something I didn't expect. He said he was visiting New York soon for a conference and wondered if I wanted to meet. My hands trembled as I typed yes. It felt impossible to say no, even though I had no idea what I would feel when I saw him again. We chose a small cafe near the park, a place that almost felt symbolic. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early, my heart hammering with nerves. I wore a simple dress and tied my hair back, wanting to look neat without seeming like I was trying too hard. I sat near the window watching people pass by, wondering if I had made a mistake. Then I saw him. He walked in slowly, wearing a dark coat, and for a second the years disappeared. But as he came closer, I saw the differences. His face had lines now, small creases near his eyes, and he carried more weight on his frame. His green eyes weren't as bright as I remembered, and a wave of realization swept through me. "Hi, Sophia," he said with a smile that carried a touch of familiarity and a touch of distance. "Hi," I answered, my voice a little shaky. We sat down, ordered coffee, and began to talk. The conversation moved easily enough, about work, about university, about the years that had passed. He told me about his teaching in Boston, and I told him about finishing my studies and my dream of becoming a writer. But even as we spoke, I felt something missing. He was kind, polite, the same calm man I had once admired so deeply. Yet the fire that once lit up every word, every look, every stolen moment between us, it wasn't there anymore. The man I had loved at 16 lived only in my memory, and the woman sitting across from him was no longer the girl who used to wait for his letters. After 2 hours, our conversation faded into silence. He looked at me with warmth and said, "It was really nice to see you." I smiled, feeling a strange mixture of peace and sadness. "It was nice to see you too," I replied softly. That evening, walking back to my apartment, I felt light and heavy at the same time. There was sadness in realizing how much had changed, but also peace in knowing that I could finally close that chapter. I thought about everything we had shared, and for the first time I could say it clearly. It had been real, but it was over. A few days later, he sent me a message. "It was nice meeting you. I hope we can stay friends." I smiled at the screen before typing back, "Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I wish you all the best." We exchanged a few more messages, polite and short, but deep inside I already knew. It was time to let go for good. 1 week later, I was walking through the park near my apartment when the sky opened and it began to rain. I stood under a tree watching the raindrops fall, turning the world soft and silver. For a moment, the sound of the rain carried me back to those nights when he walked me home, his umbrella tilting over both our heads. I remembered the way his voice had once wrapped around me like safety, his gentle smile, and the way my heart had raced at the smallest touch. And then, standing under that tree, I smiled. Not because I missed him, but because I finally understood. Life, I thought, is like rain. Sometimes it feels cold and heavy, sometimes it makes you cry, but it also helps flowers bloom. It washes away the old, making room for something new. I still think of Mr. Daniels sometimes, but now when he comes into my mind, I don't feel the ache of loss. Instead, I feel calm, almost grateful. He had been part of my story, a chapter one will never forget, but he was not the whole book. He wasn't the ending. Now I am writing new pages every day. I have a job I love, teaching children how to read and write. I watch their eyes light up when they understand a story, when a new word makes sense, and it fills me with a quiet joy. In a way, I feel like I'm passing forward what he once gave me, the belief that words can change lives. Maybe one day, years from now, a student will think back to my class the way I think back to him. Maybe I'll become someone's favorite teacher, someone they remember not just for lessons, but for kindness. And if that happens, then I'll know that the story didn't end with loss. It continued in a new form. Because that's what life does. It moves forward. People grow, feelings change, and what once felt eternal becomes a memory. But memories are not useless. They teach us. They shape who we become. They show us what it means to love, to lose, and to start again. And sometimes the most beautiful stories are not the ones that last forever, but the ones that live quietly inside us, teaching us lessons we never forget. Those are the stories that stay in the heart, shining like little lights, reminding us that even endings can be beginnings. The rain fell harder, whispering against the leaves, softening the edges of the city around me. I stayed under that tree, not rushing home, not hiding from the storm. For once, I let the rain fall on me the way memories sometimes do. Unexpected, cold at first, but then strangely comforting. It felt like the world itself was reminding me that everything changes, everything passes, and everything grows again. I closed my eyes and thought about the girl I used to be. The girl who sat in literature class, hanging on every word of a teacher's voice. The girl who walked home in the rain, clutching feelings too big for her heart. The girl who wrote letters, waited for replies, and dreamed about impossible futures. She felt so far away from me now, yet she was still inside me, like an echo that shaped who I had become. Mr. Daniels was not the hero of my life story. He wasn't the villain either. He was a chapter, a bright, complicated, unforgettable chapter. For a long time I thought losing him meant losing love itself. But standing there in the park, listening to the steady rhythm of rain, I finally understood something important. Love does not always stay. Sometimes it enters quietly, teaches us what it means to feel, and then leaves. And that's okay. When I walked out of the park that day, I carried a new kind of peace with me. It wasn't the fire of first love, nor the ache of heartbreak. It was softer, steadier, like a flame that doesn't burn but warms. I knew I could look back on him, on us, without breaking apart. I could smile at the memory and still keep walking forward. Life kept moving as it always does. I poured myself into my work, teaching children how to read and write. First, it was just a job. But slowly I realized it was more than that. Each time I saw a child's eyes light up with understanding, each time I heard laughter ripple through the classroom, I felt the power of stories all over again. I wasn't just teaching letters and grammar. I was teaching hope. One afternoon, a little girl stayed behind after class. She held a book in her hands and asked me, "Why do stories matter so much?" I smiled, remembering my own younger self, the one who once asked silent questions about love and meaning. I told her, "Stories are how we remember who we are. They teach us about other people, but they also teach us about ourselves." She nodded, hugging the book close, and for a moment I thought, maybe this is what all the pain was for. Maybe it was leading me here. Sometimes, when I sit at my desk after class, I still take out the book of poems Mr. Daniels gave me. The pages are worn now, the ink slightly faded, but his handwriting inside remains clear. Never stop writing. For years, those words felt like a promise from him to me. Now they feel like a promise I made to myself. And I keep that promise. I write every day. Small stories, reflections, pieces of my heart that I place on paper. Not all of them are perfect, but each one reminds me that my voice matters. If he gave me anything lasting, it wasn't love or romance, it was belief. Belief in the power of words, belief in my own ability to create, and belief that even endings can be beautiful. Do I still think about him? Yes, but not with longing anymore. I think of him the way you think of an old song. You hear the melody, you smile at the memory, and then you let it fade into the background while you live in the present. He was a part of my story, but he doesn't own it. The rest belongs to me. Looking back now, I understand that love at 16 feels like forever, but forever is rarely what it seems. We change, they change, and life pulls us in different directions. That doesn't mean the love was fake or wasted. It means it did its job. It shaped us, taught us, and gave us the strength to move into the next chapter. When I tell my students stories in class, I sometimes catch myself smiling at how everything came full circle. I used to be the one sitting in silence, listening to every word, hoping to find meaning. Now I'm the one speaking, and maybe someone out there is silently holding on to my words. It makes me realize how powerful influence can be. One person's kindness, one person's encouragement, can ripple through years and lives in ways we never expect. I don't know where Mr. Daniels is now. Maybe he still teaches, maybe he moved on to something else. Maybe he has a family, children of his own, who sit at the table while he tells them bedtime stories. I don't need to know. What matters is that for a short time our paths crossed, and that crossing left a mark. The truth is, not every love story is meant to last forever. And that's not a tragedy, it's just life. What matters is what we carry with us when the story ends. For me, it was courage, creativity, and the realization that I could survive heartbreak and still grow stronger. I once thought love was about holding on as tightly as possible. Now I see that sometimes real love is about letting go with grace, with kindness, with gratitude. And in letting go, you make space for new beginnings. So here I am, still writing, still teaching, still growing. I'm not the quiet girl who once stared at a teacher's smile like it was the sun. I'm a woman who knows her worth, who understands that life is a collection of chapters, not a single story. And every chapter, no matter how short, adds meaning to the book. When I think of Mr. Daniels now, I don't think of heartbreak. I think of rain, of poems, of green eyes that once made me believe in myself. I think of a girl who dared to love, even when it scared her, and who learned that love doesn't need to last forever to be real. And maybe that's the message I want to leave with you. Don't fear endings. Don't fear change. Because sometimes the stories that don't last forever are the ones that stay with us the longest. They are the ones that whisper to us when life feels heavy, reminding us that we are stronger than we think and braver than we believe. So I keep walking forward, writing new pages, turning the story of my life into something worth telling. Because in the end, love isn't just about who stays. It's about what we learn, who we become, and how we carry those lessons into the future. And maybe, just maybe, the most beautiful love stories are not the ones that end in happily ever after, but the ones that teach us to write our own.